Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 715, and today's date is July 13th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Greek government is in the process of selling out the people in favor of the central bankers. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand out in Greece, Tspiras proposed a bailout solution to the EU. And basically the plan, which we discussed before, included all those things the people voted no to. This is what they didn't want. They didn't want austerity. They didn't want cuts. They wanted economic growth. They want stability. They want a future. But of course, this is not what they got. The Eurozone leaders, they've reached an agreement over a third 3-year bailout for a debt-ridden Greece worth about 82 to 86 billion euros. Now, Tspiras is going to take this and he's going to bring it back to Greece, where the Syriza party is going to vote on this. And it looks like he needs to gather support for this deal, because there's a lot of government officials saying, yeah, this is not good. What are we doing here? There are already Greek lawmakers of the governing Syriza party that reject the bailout agreement between Greece and its creditors. So we're looking at the situation right now, and we're seeing that this plan that came back from the Euro group does not look good. Basically, what they're doing here is they're taking over the country. I mean, Tspiras was out there and he released a statement to the Greek people, and he said, "We have been fighting hard for 6 months now, and we fought until the end to achieve the best possible outcome, an agreement that will enable the country to get back on its feet and for the Greek people to be able to continue to fight." Now, really, is this the best deal they can come up with? Does this really help the people? I'm sorry to say, no, it does not. We are seeing the same thing that we saw in the last couple of bailouts. It is not going to help the people whatsoever. It's going to put Greece further and further into debt. And we're starting to see that the banks are still closed right now. They'll be closed until Thursday, a lot longer than they said, or it could go longer than that. We don't know at this point in time. But we're seeing other financial institutions like Barclays, they're out there saying the country's banks, which were on the verge of collapse, would need to be recapitalized. And according to one banking official, said that the cost of that recap would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 14 billion euros. But even if Greece does manage to secure a new bailout this week, which includes the 25 billion euros in recap funding via the agreed upon escrow fund, the banks are by no means out of the woods, with depositors continue withdrawing their funds, even though there's a limit of about 60 euros per day. Greek banks' liquidity needs have reached a level very close to the current ELA ceiling. Basically, the banks are insolvent. And we can see at this point in time that, yeah, they might have to impose capital controls, and this might last a much longer time than everyone has been talking about. And we see right now there are still bail-ins on the table. They haven't removed that whatsoever. Now, we can see that Tspiras is trying to convince the people, trying to convince the government officials that everything is fine. This is what you wanted. But it's completely the opposite of what the people wanted. And we're starting to see that from a leaked document that this plan calls for privatization, selling off bits and pieces of the country. They could be selling off airports, airplanes, infrastructure, and of course, banks. they will take those funds and they will use it to pay back the bankers. So they're going to be selling this off, most likely to other central bankers or other corporations. They will take this money that they receive and they will use it to pay off their loans. Basically, they're slicing up Greece right now. And we can see at this point in time, does this help the people? No, it doesn't. Because the proceeds are going to go to the insolvent banks, to the central bankers, and what is going to go to the people? Nothing. So they lose parts of their country. It's being sold off. This completely bypasses them. There's no economic growth. There is no help. The people are exactly where they started. They have still no jobs. Unemployment is continually going up. We see the youth unemployment very, very high, and that means the next generation is going to be worse off. And at this point in time, this plan does not help the people whatsoever. And we're seeing the Greek lawmakers, they're saying, listen, we don't know if we're going to go along with this at all. I mean, this is not what we agreed upon. The deal came back and it was rewritten. It's worse than we agreed upon. Leftist group of lawmakers in Greece ruling Syriza party considering voting against bailout deal. And we're looking at this, and yeah, the deal has been altered. And the Greek defense minister is saying the bailout deal is a coup. The deal is beyond what was agreed during the political leaders summit under the president of the Hellenic Republic, which the Greek parliament ratified. To that agreement, as a sign of goodwill, and even though it was against our conscience, we said yes. But to this deal, which brings new data, which talks about 50 billion euros as collateral of public assets, which talks about decrees for changes of laws like the Criminal Procedure Code, which will lead to house foreclosures, which refers to a complete collapse, even of constitutional ideals. We cannot agree, he said. And we are seeing that, yeah, the bankers went all in. They want Greece on its knees. They want the Greek people to suffer. And they're showing other countries, listen, you don't do this. This is what's going to happen. And we're looking at the situation and we're seeing that Greece still has payments coming up. And Greece is not going to meet a 450 million euro loan repayment to the International Monetary Fund that falls due on Monday. They're not even going to reach the payment due at the end of the month. And they're very worried about this samurai bond, because if this is missed and it isn't paid, they're saying it could cause a cross default on other public bonds, a complete meltdown of the system. And when we look at this whole entire situation, again, the people who sat there and voted and said no, who are still saying no, they're just, no one cares. The central bankers want what they want. They want to punish those people who don't pay back their debt. What happened to the investigation for odious debt? What happened to Syriza saying no more austerity? Well, this new deal that was completely rewritten by the central bankers is worse than they have ever had before. So we're looking at this entire situation, and we're going to have to watch what the Greek government does. I think the bankers have given Greece until Sunday to come up with a decision on what they're going to do. Yes, they're going to go along with it. No, they're not going to go along with it. And we'll have to watch this very carefully, how this plays out. Now, here in the United States, of course, the United States government, central bankers are telling us that everything is fantastic. We're in a recovery. More and more jobs are being added. This is why the unemployment's coming down. But when we look, the real economic indicators show us completely something opposite of all this. I mean, Macy's is selling its landmark downtown Pittsburgh store, laying off the people, getting rid of it. We see Walmart and Sam's Club. They're laying off 1,000 people in their corporate offices. Now, if everything is perfectly fine and people are getting jobs, people are taking that money that they're earning and they're going out and spending it in retail, online, we would see retail expanding. We would see everything expanding because people have extra disposable income. But you know what we're seeing? We're not seeing that. We're seeing the opposite. Actually, think about it. Go back to 2010, 11, 12, when they were telling us the unemployment numbers were much higher. And now they're almost half of what they were. Why are stores closing? Why are they going out of business? Why are major corporations laying off more and more people? Something doesn't make sense. Why was the last holiday season the worst we've seen? If unemployment is half of what it was, think about it. It makes no sense. And of course, people are out there saying, oh, it's the online retail. Well, then why didn't Cyber Monday, why wasn't that incredible? It should have picked up all the slack from Black Friday, right? It didn't. Not even close. And the whole holiday season was a complete disaster. During the holiday season, stores were closing down, going out of business, laying off people. And as soon as the holiday season was over, more of the same. But we know the central bankers are preparing. They're getting ready to take your money from the banking system. We know the bail-in documents were created. They don't create them for no reason. They're creating all of this for a reason. And when we look closely at it, we start to see some strange things that at least I haven't noticed before. But now when I look at it, it's becoming clearer and clearer as we go along. Now we know they've created the bail-in documents. And we know what they're going to do is they're going to take those funds that are in the bank and they're going to turn them into stocks, basically, of the bank. And if the bank should fail, what is going to happen here? Well, these stocks then, they're a liability of the bank. And they would be in danger of being written down should the bank fail. So if a large bank fails in the U.S., your deposits at this bank would either be written down or converted into equity or stock shares in the company. And once they are converted to equity, you are a shareholder, not a depositor. You are no longer insured by the FDIC. So if the bank then fails, so does your deposit. It fails, it disappears, bye-bye. So even though they're telling you they're taking a portion of your account, like in Tspiras, they took 47% on average, and they replaced it with worthless bank stock. If that bank goes under, you're no longer covered by the FDIC for that bank stock. Very interesting. Everything they're doing benefits them. It does not benefit the people. And you can see why the people in Greece decided, maybe we should start taking out our funds from the bank because we can see what's happening. They saw what happened to their neighbors in Cyprus, and they knew they didn't want this to happen once again. So they went out and they took out their money as much as they possibly could. Here in the United States and throughout European nations who don't understand, who are not really paying attention, once they lock down the banks, you will no longer be able to take that money out. It will be stuck in there. Yes, you have a little portion that you can take out each day, depending on what they set it on. Like in Greece, it's 60 euros per day. And if you have a lot more than that in the bank, it's going to be a very long time before you get it out. It will be converted into stock before you even are able to touch that amount that's in there. And they're going to take whatever they need to recapitalize the banks. So when people ask, why do they need these documents? This is why they need it. Because when it comes time and the government isn't going to bail them out, they will say, well, we have this document from the FDIC, Bank of England, Europe has it, Australia has it, New Zealand has it, Canada has it, and we can go ahead and shut down the banks and take what we need. And the rest is going to be converted. Basically, they're just taking it all. So we can see at this point in time that everyone needs to be prepared for this. You need to be ready. Personally, I only keep as much as I need to pay my bills. The rest is in cash. The rest is in gold and silver. Of course, do not tell people where you're putting it. And this is what everyone should be thinking of at this point, because you don't want to be in that situation where you wake up on Saturday and say, oh my God, I never got around to doing this and all my money is stuck in there and now the banks are on bank holidays. We see here that the United States government central bankers, they're continuing their propaganda that all parts of the country are under cyber attacks. We need new laws. They've come out that the Financial Services Information Services and Analysis Center is saying that retail point-of-sale systems are under increasingly sophisticated and relentless remote assault by cyber criminals. And we need to do something. We need to pass some type of legislation to protect ourselves. And of course, what they're doing at this point in time is they're pushing the cyber legislation right now. They're continually telling you about cyber attacks. Now, if and when that cyber legislation is passed, all of a sudden you'll see all these cyber attacks completely disappear. They won't be hitting stores anymore. You won't hear any of this in the news. It'll just disappear. Just like we saw DHS when they were going for their budget funding. They were coming up with all these warnings. The Islamic State is in the malls. We have threats from all different areas. And as soon as they got their budget, guess what? It completely disappeared. The FBI director is out there. And he is continually making his case. And he's with the Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, testified before a Senate Judiciary Committee. And they're saying that, listen, we know we have encryption here. We want to work with the private sector to come up with some type of solution. But listen, if they don't give and they don't give us full access, we will just default to legislative mandate and we will force them to comply with us, which means they will have to come in line and they will give all the agencies full access to their systems, backdoors. And we can see at this point in time, we know they're not going after terrorists. We know they want to spy on the American people. They're doing it to spy on government officials. They're trying to get investment information. They're trying to use certain information to blackmail certain people. And what's very interesting about all this, Yates said that when the Department of Justice is presented with instances of encryption, they no longer even try to secure a wiretap order. When asked how many times this has happened, she replied, well, it's kind of hard to give you these numbers on the number of cases that have been impacted. It's kind of impossible to do. So we really don't have that information. But when we look, and we look at the numbers, we see, yeah, they have no case. This is why they couldn't give any of these numbers. And you're trying to tell me that they don't keep a record of this? Well, according to the United States Court's wiretap report of 2014, published on December 31st, 2014, there were a total of 3,554 wiretaps reported as authorized in 2014, with 1,279 authorized by federal judges and 2,275 authorized by state judges. Note that these are the only official reported instances of legal wiretaps and does not include illegal wiretaps or those authorized by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. It should also be noted that 89% of the wiretaps involved were for illegal drug use. 4% involved homicide cases. 3% involved smuggling of money laundering. And terrorism, it wasn't even on the list. This is why they couldn't give any of the numbers. Because if you're trying to make a case and you're trying to convince people that you need a backdoor into software, well, you got to come up with some numbers here. You got to have some information to back it all up. And of course, none of these agencies ever do. They're just trying to use scare tactics, fear-mongering, to convince Congress to allow them to have these backdoors. But we can see at this point in time, they have no legs to stand on right now. But of course, as we know, the government employees, they're not working for the people. They're working for special interest groups, corporations, central bankers, foreign countries. And most likely, these agencies will probably get permission. And they'll present a bill to allow them to have the backdoor entry into all these companies. Again, what we're seeing here is a completely disregard to the people's rights. They don't care. They'll violate them any way they want because they're nervous about what the people are thinking, and they need to keep tabs on everyone. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Ukraine is in basically the same situation as Greece. They're heading towards a default. Their economy is failing. It is collapsing. The people are suffering in this country. And Yatsenyuk is out there saying that Ukraine's creditors should collaborate with Kiev and agree on debt restructuring offers suggested by the government. In mid-June, Ukraine asked creditors to take a 40% write-down in principal and accept new bonds tied to its future economic performance under its repayment plan. Of course, the creditors are looking at this. There's a gag order to hide what the real deal is. But of course, when Greece says they should have a write-down of the debt, the creditors were like, no, absolutely not. That is absolutely against what we believe. But in Ukraine, it's a completely different story because, as we know, the United States government central bankers are controlling that situation. They need Ukraine. It's in a strategic location. They want the southeastern people gone. They want Crimea. And of course, they're using it to provoke Russia. We see Ukraine right now. They will sign an agreement on a free trade zone with Canada. So Canada is going to purchase their machines and their consumer goods. And Canada is all part of the private Western central bank system, just like the United States, Europe. And we can see at this point in time, all these countries are involved. And when these countries start to fall apart, it will be like a domino effect. It's going to go throughout Europe, into the United States, Canada, Australia. All of these countries are going to be affected. Now, Moscow is out there, and they are saying they have proof of Kiev's crimes against humanity. Russia's investigation into the conflict in Ukraine has indicated that the pro-Kiev forces committed crimes against humanity in Donbass. They're saying they're going to present the information because they have proof, and we'll have to wait to see what they actually have and what is presented, because as we know, that was an event in that area during the time when they said they were finding the terrorist group, and they created the anti-terrorist group, and there was a huge fire in the region in Odessa. They were shelling and bombing the people in Donbass. So we'll have to see what Russia comes up with and see if they can actually prove it. Now, it seems like inside Ukraine, things are getting a little crazy in there, and it looks like Poroshenko might be losing control of the country because, as we know, the currency in Ukraine is completely falling apart. The people don't want to fight a war. They don't want to fight a war against their brothers and sisters, cousins. They're just not into it. They want to go back to their families. They want to make a living. They want to go on vacation. They want to live a life without war. The Poroshenko government completely fall apart. we're starting to see there are tensions have been rising between the government and the right sector militia. Now, the right sector helped in overthrowing the elected government. So the right sector was working for the U.S. government central bankers, and they used them to overthrow the government in Ukraine for the coup d'etat. And now it seems like the Ukrainian government and the right sector group, they're fighting with each other. We're also seeing that the right sector is going to mount protest until the interior minister resigns. And also, what's happening in Ukraine is the tank battalions are starting to say, you know something? What are we doing here? Why are we fighting? Servicemen from a Ukrainian tank battalion have reportedly recorded a video message to President Poroshenko. You know what they said? They said they had enough. They had enough of the mayhem. They had enough of this mayhem going on in the army. And they would soon refuse to take orders from their command. They said they came forward to defend their country. They're not cowards, but they wanted to go home. Their 1-year contract have come to an end. We've given all we could. We stayed alive, and now our wives and children are waiting for us at home. And they're saying that it's enough. There's no reason to keep this going. And basically what's going on here are the armed forces are starting to revolt. They're saying, you know something? We're done here. You need to honor your promises. There's no reason for us to stay in the armed forces. We served. Our contract has ended, but they will not let them go. Because they're pushing the next offensive. They know they're going to be doing it. And these people now are starting to get upset. They want to go home. And they don't want to be a part of this anymore. And we're starting to see that the U.S. has been training the National Guard forces in Ukraine. They have about 300 U.S. advisors there. Most likely there's many more. But they're looking at phase 2 right now, which could begin in late November, where they're going to train the armed forces, the Army. And this is coming from Army Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. And he's saying that we'd like to bring in another 300 U.S. forces. He's saying that the United Kingdom is already in Ukraine training the armed forces, the army, the regular army. And the U.S. would like to join and help out with this. Because we need to train them, he's saying, because we need to fight against Russia and the southeastern people. And we know this is all completely fake, phony, and false. We know they want to bring forces in there. We know they're going to be bringing lethal weapons in there. We know there's already lethal weapons in Ukraine. We know they're going to mount a major offensive. They haven't been following the Minsk II agreement. And now they're losing control of their army. And this will spread unless they can get something started. Because otherwise, what they're seeing here is those people who have been, drafted in saying, we're done here. We don't need to be here anymore. There's a ceasefire. They keep telling us there's a Minsk II agreement. Our contract has ended. It's time to let us go. We see the U.S. guided missile destroyer Jason Dunham is taking part in Latvia as part of the U.S. commitment to support Baltic nations against the overhyped, non-existent threat from Russia and to increase security in the region. So that ship is out there during the drills. We also see a Russian politician, and he is predicting that the U.S. is planning a coup to oust Putin. Evgeny Fedorov, a member of Russia's Duma or parliament, is predicting that the Russian President Putin will be overthrown by a U.S. coup. He says the U.S. government agents have passed word to the Russian oligarchs that they will benefit from the end of the U.S. sanctions, and that any oligarch who cooperates will not only enjoy privileged positions in the successor government, but if the plan fails, they will be guaranteed in the U.S. a position of wealth and power that will match or exceed what they currently enjoy under Putin. And this is really what they do. They go in and they get these oligarchs, they get groups, they make promises that they will benefit. Look what happened in Ukraine. They made promises to certain people, and they are benefiting. Look at Libya, look at Lebanon, look at Yemen, look at Iraq. Look at Syria, the Free Syrian Army. Certain individuals were promised certain things. That if you joined us and you fought, when the government is overthrown, you will be part of the new government. You will be part of the new wealth confiscation. And we can see already they've been trying this in many different countries, not just the Middle East and Ukraine. They tried in China, it failed. They tried in Venezuela, it failed. Argentina. They will try in Russia. Remember, they came up with the document saying that these are our enemies now. Forget about terrorism. North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, Syria. These are the enemies, and unless the United States can conquer them, we're in big trouble. Well, what they're really talking about is the central bankers. These countries are on a different plane. They're not working with the private Western central bank community, and so they are the enemy of the central bankers. Has nothing to do with freedom, democracy, or anything like that. And this is how wars are started. They know that the entire system of the private Western central bank countries, it's collapsing, falling apart. And they know eventually, to cover this entire thing, they will have to provoke war. If they can't provoke it, they will do it on their own and make it look like the country or the group started some type of war. We see out in Iran, the P5+1 talks are continuing. And with the sanctions dropped and the partial lift of the arms embargo, Iran will be able to supply weapons to its allies in the region with the full blessing of the international community. The agreement states that the Iranians will continue supplying defensive weapons to its regional allies to fight against terrorism and extremism. Iran right now is working on plans for a petrochemical exports to North American countries, including the U.S. And a special plan right now has been devised in order to export petrochemical products at competitive prices to North America countries. Numerous European companies have started their negotiations with Iran for resuming imports of petrochemicals. The question is, are they using the U.S. dollar to sell these resources? And of course, as you know, they will. This is what it's all about. It's about Iran selling their natural resources using the dollar. Not about a nuclear weapon. They want to make sure they're disarmed, so if anything happens, the U.S. or other nations can go in there quite quickly and disarm them and take over the country. Believe me, the United States government central bankers would rather the government be removed in Iran, just like it was in Lebanon, Libya, Yemen, Iraq, because they believe they can control the situation a lot easier if this happens. But right now, they're running out of time. They know they need to make a major offensive in Syria. They know they need to make this deal in Iran to get into the central bank and to put the natural resources on the dollar, to prop it up for a little longer. Now, out in the Middle East, we are seeing each one of these countries, Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, they're completely under attack by the people of those countries. They're trying to remove the puppet governments there. They want their countries back. And we know that Libya, just like Yemen, just like Lebanon, they're problems. Right now, the puppet government in Libya is not in Tripoli. is in a completely different location, and they really don't have control of the entire country. The people government in Tripoli, they are running the country. Now, the UN is trying to negotiate a peace deal, and they're saying that they've come to an agreement, that they have this peace deal. The only problem is that the government of Tripoli is not going to sign it. They reject the deal because it removes their power. It puts the puppet government back into power. And they're saying right now that these peace terms are not recognized right now under the government of Libya. And I'm not talking about the puppet government, I'm talking about the people government in Tripoli. So right now, we're seeing that the UN, the US, and other nations who are trying to negotiate this peace deal just didn't include, or they don't care if they're included, and they're saying that the peace deal is good to go. It sounds like the same thing that's happening in Ukraine, where they're talking about peace and ceasefire, but they don't include the southeastern people, the people that they're attacking. And we can see at this point in time, that means there is no peace deal. And the Tripoli Parliament is not going to sign it. They don't recognize it. And this is why the U.S. government right now is going to be setting up bases in North America, very close to Libya. And these bases are going to be set up for drone operations. Right now, the United States is holding discussions with countries in North Africa about locating drones at a base to monitor the Islamic State, and I'm doing air quotes, in Libya. Such a base near the Islamic State strongholds in Libya would help the United States. Now, the officials, the military officials said these bases and these drone operations, they would be able to use them for airstrikes in Libya if needed. So we can see what's going on right now. There really is no peace deal. They're setting up the drone bases so they can fly the drones into Libya, because what they're doing and what they're getting ready to do is they're getting ready to go into Libya. First, they're going to use drones to see if they can bomb out the government in parliament. They're not going after the Islamic State. Most likely, they're there with about 20 or 30 IS people, the proxy army for the United States government, central bankers, with a camera crew, and that's about it. The rest are the people who've been fighting against the puppet government, who want their country back. We see out in Iraq, the Iraqi military has been having a very tough time fighting their own people. They're really not fighting the Islamic State. This is really the people rising up in the country, trying to take back Iraq, just like it's happening in Lebanon, Libya, Yemen. They're using the Islamic State to show that there's chaos in there, that the Islamic State has been taking over. But really, the Islamic State is really the Free Syrian Army, which is really in Syria. They're using that to hit Damascus, to get rid of Assad. And then they have the Islamic State in all these other countries to cause chaos, to make you believe that the Islamic State is all over the place. This way they can use the authorization for war, which says they can go after the Islamic State in any one of these countries. Right now, the authorization for war only says they can go after Al-Qaeda. So they need the new one approved, but it's just sitting in Congress. It is going absolutely nowhere. Now, we know the Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government, central bankers in Israel, continually put out propaganda of people being decapitated, people being drowned, people being burned. And all this is to keep us in fear. And, of course, when these come out, we look at it and we say, oh, look, see, this doesn't match. The knives don't match. There's no blood when they were cutting into the person's neck. And we called it fake, phony, and false. Now, all of a sudden, we see a video that was released by Cyber Berkut. And they're saying that this was completely staged. Here's the sound studio. Here's the people standing there during the filming. And I'm looking at it. I don't know where it actually really came from, the origins of it, who the people are responsible for this. And what strikes me as odd is they're saying that this video was hacked by Cyber from a device of Senator John McCain from one of his staffers who was on a trip to Ukraine. Now the question is, why would they be carrying this around if they're visiting Ukraine? Why would they even have this on them? So this to me seems like this might be fake, and we might see in a couple days later where they come out and they say, look at all those people that reported on it. You see, they'll believe anything, and it turns out to be completely fake. It's all propaganda to make the independent media look really bad. And this part of hacking into Senator John McCain while on a trip to Ukraine, that is the red flag for me, because there is no way in the world that someone would be carrying this around with them. It makes no sense to do so. This stuff would be kept under lock and key. So right now I'm holding off on this to say that this is actually real, because I'm thinking they're using this to convince everyone that the independent media is a bunch of morons. Now, out in Syria, there's a report that an Assyrian intelligence chief was assassinated. Now, the circumstances of his death were not made immediately clear, and right now no official government source confirmed the report. But as we know, the United States government, central bankers, and other coalition forces are inside Syria. And we know they are gunning for Assad or anyone high in his organization. And we know they would assassinate these people, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove Assad, and they'll do it any way they possibly can. And as we know, they are making a move coming very soon to get into Syria and remove Assad. This is the whole entire plan. And if they can remove more of his staff, or even him, it would make it easier for them to take over Syria. And we can see at this point in time, with the Free Syrian Army coming from Turkey, moving south, the proxy army out to the east, moving west now, the safe zones that they want to implement. We see the Free Syrian Army coming up from the south, moving north. They are surrounding Damascus. And we see at this point in time that they are just waiting for the event and for the go-ahead to move into Damascus and take out Assad. This has been the plan all along. And we see they are building towards this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.